So I'm just setting up the new studio because I'm in a point where I'm releasing the Hermes adapter, the Quentin, shortly. This is currently January. Don't really know when it's going to be released properly, but up to date, no documentation has really been done, and no kind of tutorials have been done. So the idea is to be a digital first company, of course, and record videos and screen capture to demonstrate how to use the multi-plug and also the Hermes extension on top of it. So the idea is to have a little studio, just a simple backdrop, just working on the lighting, going to get rid of all those creases in the background, all those shadows eventually. But to date, really, I haven't really created a diary. So this is probably going to be the first one. To date, the first round of Quentin was created. A smaller box, single lane, and that's the one which was on the website doing the promotion. I haven't done any direct promotion or advertising to date, but I've got a lot of inquiries simply by people probably Googling it and coming up with the website. So the first round, the first version was a single lane, smaller box. It was Raspberry Pi 3 driving it, and the electronics was just me having a go. So it was a bit of a bird's nest. I was just about to go and test it, and I wanted to run past all the electronics with someone, electronics engineer, because I wasn't confident. A lot of people just said just make a load and just get out there, but when you're a one-man band, you do take things very hesitantly forward. You know that when things go wrong, you're the only person to fix it, and that distracts you from anything else you're doing. So there is an element of I want elements of it very close to being perfect. They won't be perfect, but they'll definitely be a good MVP, minimal viable product. So anyway, I was just about to go and test it, and I got an electronics engineer to look at it. And as normal with electronics, there's a few ways of doing the same thing. I think my way of doing it would have worked actually. We kind of getting on board electronics engineer, as normal with any sort of engineering, there was a ramp up stage, and to be honest, I think by the time we got to the point where I got to, he had basically done something very similar to what I did. However, there was a benefit to that, which was the fact that by that point I commissioned a proper PCB to be made, so the initial box would have worked, but there were also other upgrades to be made anyway. So I need to get the PCB to be made anyway, but also the box in the time that I created the box, the Raspberry Pi 4 came out, so I knew I had to get the actual enclosure respun, and so I took that opportunity to get that done and then upgrade it to Raspberry Pi 4. There are a few advantages of Raspberry Pi 4. First of all, it's more powerful. Secondly, it has a direct connection to its USB power port, meaning you can attach it directly to a PC. Something to do with it being wired directly to the actual processor on the Raspberry Pi. And what that allows me to do is do upgrades from a PC to the actual box. What you have to remember is this box, majority of the time, probably will not be running online. It will not be connected to the internet. So what I don't want to do is send it out to a customer or evaluation partner and them to go, it's not working, and I go, okay, yeah, I found a fix, now it needs to be upgraded. Now in multi-plug I've done this from day one, an upgrade path, but again, there's always a ramp up and getting someone to understand how to do it. So I want to get to a point where literally they connect a cable into their PC, connect the other end into the Quentin box, and then press one button and it does an upgrade, downloads the latest upgrade from the internet, and then pushes it to the box. So that's what the Raspberry Pi 4 gave me. So I thought that was a good point to kind of, I guess you call it, respin what I already done. Maybe delay it, but it would be beneficial. All these delays are all going to be beneficial in the future. And again, it goes back to the fact that I'm essentially a project manager at the moment. I'm just talking to lots of people via email and getting people to do things. So I'm not necessarily a one-man band. I've got other people doing stuff, but at the same time, it's just me at the hub. I'm the single point of failure at this point. So another thing that came along, which it was the opportunity to do dual lane. So a production line might have two production lines right next to it. The advantage is really footprint. So rather than running two lines away from each other, bringing them together means you can obviously make more product and then right next to each other. Again, that was a point where I had to think about, do I create one PCB that does single lane and one that does dual lane, or do I just make the decision now to do dual lane from the very start and maybe not populate all the components if I wanted to make a single lane one? So that was a decision I had to make, and I made it, and it was good to make that decision. I think in the long term, again, it gives the product flexibility. I think talking to my fellow hardware, well, I'm not a fellow, but to people who work in the hardware field, I think there is a tendency sometimes to make a product multi-purpose, and therefore it bloats. And so I am going down that danger of doing that. That said, I think it was a good call. It was also inspired. I went to an equipment supplier of electronic assembly equipments supplier, and they required dual lane, but in a single lane formation, and their solution was going to use two of my boxes, and they're from the day one that was always my thought, which is if you got dual lane, you just use two of them. But that felt to me more configuration that was required. You have to configure two things rather than one. Yeah, okay, it goes against the modularity of it all. But that was their solution. I pushed back on that because it was a stealth meeting. I went for one thing, and then they asked me to do a requirement to it. I wasn't happy with embedding the product in their product at that time, because the electronics wasn't sound at that point. It is now, actually, so I probably could do it today. But what it demonstrated actually in that meeting is that actually the extension, the Hermes extension, wasn't able to communicate with more than one lane at that point. So their requirement of you needing to communicate with more than one lane and the concept of having a dual lane box made sense. The other thing to say, coming away from that meeting, is how to use other bits of hardware and not just the hardware in the Quentin box, which I'm creating. So all this should be modular. So you should have a software running on one PC, the hardware running on something else, and you should be able to connect it up. The Quentin box has all the hardware, software, and everything else inside one box, and of course most customers will just want that. But what it did demonstrate, and these are always the feel-good factors when you're developing something, and you can then adapt it. It kind of proves its purpose. If you create something and it's rock solid and you can't change it, and then it just, you know that the next customer that comes along with a requirement is going to break your architecture. Well, this was a situation where it didn't break my architecture at all. Okay, yes, I had to make the Hermes extension operate 2 lines, 2 or more. It can actually do as many as you like now. So the software can manage more than 1 line, and then it can communicate with another supplier's hardware. And I found the hardware that would work perfectly with it, which is the BrainBox ED004. That had 3 relays and 3 I/O, which is exactly what you need when you want to communicate with SMEMA upline and downline. So you just need 2 of those boxes communicating to the software, the multiplug software running the Hermes extension, and then it will all work. I actually went back and proposed that solution to the equipment manufacturer. They said that they were moving on with their own solution. I imagine those project managers in the room just wanted to get something done. But I imagine when it went back up to management, then management had said, no, let's not do that. It's too risky, probably. But it goes to show that every single meeting you have, every single opportunity you're faced, stimulates the brain, and you can come away with it with more opportunities or another view on something. So that was good timing also, and that's why I'm definitely working at this at full speed, but at the same time I've always got that niggle in the back of my mind that I'm going to release this product and then someone's going to jump on with a requirement. I know some customers have required scan stations. Now I can do a scan station. Scan station is where the actual product gets scanned in and then it gets verified with something upstairs, the server, the database, and then it says yes, that's okay. It can go down to the next machine. What it doesn't have out the box as a user interface, it is web-based user interface, so you would have to have a screen next to it. Again, it's all modular, and that's a solution that I can quite easily create, whether that's a physical screen that's dedicated to that task or whether it's just a monitor next to that scan station. Scan stations are quite common, they're quite expensive. All they are is barcode readers that are reading the barcode on the boards. The software quite often is DIY. It's not exactly complex software, but the emphasis of everything I'm doing is to try to productize everything that's already out in the industry, and so it can be unified, I guess. Because at the moment, engineers just they just crack out their development environment and create some quick app. Well, if you can create some off-the-shelf products, then management can be more understanding that it's going to be supported. Also, with software, is what I learned with working in web development. Web development, there's a content management system, which is a kind of the visualization of the database. It's the bit in between. You don't have the website, the database, and the content management system. Content management system is both a development tool for the developers to develop the website, but it's also the entry point for the marketeers to update the website. And what I realised about a content management system was it's a talking point. It's the centre of everything. So the marketeers, the developers, the customers can all talk about change, and also it's visual from day one. And the multi-plug is exactly the same. You can create a module of functionality in code. You can then visualize that functionality in code, and therefore by visualizing it you can stimulate someone outside the development circle to come up with an idea or suggest improvements or changes or functionality they need. Where traditionally what's happened is the software behind the scenes is nicely modular, and so much time is spent on making software modular, but as soon as it comes up to the user interface layer, it gets glued together. And so all that nice modular development and all the diagrams and coding that's gone before that just disappears. It's glued together at that point. And so so multi-plug, it emphasizes that each extension has its own user interface, and ideally everything inside that extension has its own modular element. In web, it's really easy to do because every modular bit has its own web page, and each web page can draw in its own resources, so pictures and code functionality and all that kind of stuff can be drawn in a modular way. In application development, traditionally, again, at the top it all gets glued together, and you lose all that modularity. Now, ideally, what I've realised, and if I ever do application development ever again, what I would do is create the same concept of an app. So you have the platform, which is iOS or Android, and every single bit of functionality within that platform is an app in itself. The reason why it's probably not done that way is because the teams involved are normally doing both elements. So you really do need a platform team and a app team, or a business logic team, I guess you'd call it. But quite often smaller companies, of course, they just have a pool of resource, and the people move between the two. And I've realised you need to prevent that, and one way of preventing it is making sure your software is modular, but also the modules can't be, the source code of the modules can't be changed by everyone. So you would literally say that library over there is controlled by that team over there, and that team over there controls that library, and then you put it all together, and it all works because there's contracts involved. There's ways of communicating with the platform that are defined up front. The delay in that process is the fact you have to make sure your platform is mature before anyone starts developing onto it, and that's the perceived delay that's coming from multi-plug. Now, a year ago, we got to a point where multi-plug was a good MVP, and the thought was, right, now we're going to need to go off to speak to a partner to either for them to develop an extension to see if they can use it and if it works for them, or whether we can realistically we would develop the extension. And the concern was the fact that the platform might not be mature enough for it to reap its rewards, I guess. No, the point of using a platform, it should shortcut, it should help the developers. I've worked with so many developers in my time that they love small little bits of functionality because it just makes their day quicker. It does a lot of the stuff that they get credit for. They get credit for the progress, even though they probably used a library that's given them a one-line change or fix. And so the multi-plug should be that platform that helps them get things done quickly. Now, if going back to my point, which is if we were developing on the multi-plug and actually it was slower to develop on the multi-plug because certain functionality was missing, then that wouldn't have been a very good show. So what eventually happened was we ate our own dog food and scratched our own itch, meaning we used the product as intended internally, and then we scratched our own itch, so if we found problems, we fixed them. And that was done by creating the Quentin Hermes SMEMA Adaptor box. Because now we're using the multi-plug that we've been developing for 2 years, and now we've had a 1-year project on top of that that's created this box. when the evaluation partners get it, they will get multi-plug on that box. Majority of them won't realise it's multi-plug. The majority of them won't care. But then that's a path to the future of selling the concept of multi-plug. So yeah, so where are we today? PCB has been populated. I'm literally wiring up the box as we speak, and then we can go back to a company that makes electronics in the area, and they've willingly volunteered to allow me to come and test it on their machinery. The other advantage of getting the electronics done was I went to the manufacturer that's going to manufacture the PCB. Clearly manufactures PCBs, so therefore they had the equipment there to be able to confirm how SMEMA works. Because I was going around to other people, you read the documentation and it's quite obvious that the actual implementation of SMEMA isn't the same as the documentation everywhere. They just on the documentation they use a certain component that clearly not everyone has used. So there is another component that can be used, and that's what we've used. So it looks like, just analysing other people's machinery, that's what people have done. So that's what we had to do. But again, going back to just reading documentation, I could have tripped up at that point. So it was really nice to be able to go back to, well, it was good that the people making the PCBs made that also designed PCBs and therefore could actually do my testing for me. So that was less for me to be running around with multimeters and test equipment to test all that stuff. So that really helped me. Yeah, I think that's it for today. Thank you for watching.